Donald Trump may or may not win the US election, but Trumpism finds its echo chamber in the reactionary media now being dubbed alt-right. This is a new name for an old phenomenon. White, middle-aged, right-wing men like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck ranting about blacks, gays and women. And since 2008, a supposedly socialist president. This tendency has immatured into what it is over a long period of time, from the 1990s when it was railing against big government, to the Bush era when big government in the form of endless war and the Patriot Act was just fine, to the truly incontinent Obama era when government was evil again. And throughout the latter phase of this journey, one outlet has been a shining star of the neo-right. Breitbart is one of the most popular news sites in the world, with a global Alexa ranking of 792 and a rank in the United States of 211. It is also a political big hitter now that Breitbart News has the distinction of having just lent its chairman to the Trump campaign. And unsurprisingly, Breitbart itself is a locus of regular pro-Trump propaganda. Set up by the late right-wing journalist Andrew Breitbart, initially the site provided nothing but unfiltered newswire feeds from Associated Press, Reuters and other sources. In fact, apart from the wire material, there is very little actual reporting on the site. A great deal of what is palmed off as reporting is right-wing campaigning. A recent example would be the website deciding to take up arms against retail store Target for its trans-inclusive bathroom use policy. Target boycott crosses 1 million signers, stock sinks by $1.5 billion. In fact, as Snopes.com reported, Target's stock value had not imploded, as the site claimed, and its dip in value was less significant than on previous occasions over previous months. Breitbart has a well-known association with internet trolling. It is the home of provocateurs like Milo Yiannopoulos, who was banned from Twitter after subjecting users to racist and sexist abuse. Yiannopoulos later gloated on Breitbart that Twitter shares had gone into depression after his departure. Twitter's closing share price was $18.33. Just 6 trading sessions later, Twitter's stock fell 13.97% to $15.77. In fact, Twitter had been losing value for months due to declining users, as the International Business Times reported in May, well before the Yiannopoulos departure, noting that its value was down 81% from its high. Ironically, one of the reasons cited by the piece was the ubiquity of harassment and bullying. As the Twitter CEO Dick Costolo said, quoted on MarketWatch, "They're losing users because we suck at dealing with abuse and trolls on the platform, and we've sucked at it for years." This connection is not coincidental. Breitbart is not just a scurrilous right-wing campaign organization posing as a news site. Its often spurious stories are designed to hurt and damage, as occurred with its 2 major scoops, the Acorn child prostitution scandal and the stories accusing Agriculture Department official Shirley Sherrod, an African-American woman, of racism toward white farmers. Through these headline-grabbing stories, it gained major credit for itself while also fueling the resentment of the white new middle class that black people were bringing the country down. In September 2009, Breitbart made his name and that of his website by sponsoring 2 right-wing activists, Hannah Giles and James O'Keefe, as they embarked on an attempt to entrap the employees of Acorn, a community-based NGO which helped the poor get housing, healthcare, and register to vote. Posing as a pimp and his sex worker girlfriend, they sought advice as to how they might smuggle underage sex workers into the country, set up a house for a brothel, and evade the law. In their highly edited version of the footage, which was widely shared, making them national television stars, they made it appear that leading officials in Acorn had willingly given them such advice. These videos were then released in a series to launch Breitbart's Big Government website. The edited footage was widely rebroadcast and reported, and O'Keefe and Giles became regular guests on right-wing outlets such as Fox News. The story made Breitbart's name, and, as reported by Peter Dreyer for the Huffington Post, he crowed that O'Keefe is already well on his way to being one of the great journalists and deserves a Pulitzer. Not all media outlets took Breitbart seriously. However, the New York Times, in a strikingly craven note, berated itself for not having given the story enough credibility when it first came out, because its editor said of insufficient tuned-inness to the issues that were dominating Fox News and talk radio. So what issues should the liberal media have tuned into? O'Keefe wrote a bragging piece about his escapades for Breitbart and denouncing Acorn in the language of Tea Party demagogues, but also inviting conservative activists to use the tactics he claimed, in a magnificent piece of projection, Acorn were guilty of. Interviewed on the Sean Hannity program about the footage, O'Keefe explained his method.
Basically, we went in and we just started out with the simplistics. My girlfriend's a prostitute, and then when they said that's okay, I took it to the next level, and I said, well, I know other prostitutes, and I took it to the next level, and they're trafficked in from El Salvador. I just took it when they kept saying yes, I kept getting more ridiculous and more ridiculous.
By his account, then, he was pushing at an open door. He gave them every chance to detect that something was wrong, but so eager were they to assist in facilitating a child prostitution ring, they just kept saying yes. Unfortunately for him and his partner in smear, the unedited footage didn't remain secret for long. As later reported on Gawker, California's Attorney General Jerry Brown conducted a thorough investigation into the sting on Acorn's California office and found that the tapes were severely edited. In particular, the report found that the attempt to depict Acorn officials, Lavelle Stewart and Juan Carlos Vera, as trying to assist in the smuggling of underage sex workers simply didn't stack up. Stewart was sympathetic because Giles had portrayed herself as an abused prostitute desperate for help and pushed for any advice. She said she wanted to save the El Salvadoran girls from being preyed upon and raped. She claimed the pimp put a hit out on her and injured her by pushing her down the stairs. Vera responded much less sympathetically, assuming that they were engaged in criminal action. He collected as much data as he could from the pair, pretending to be helpful, and then promptly called the cops as soon as they were gone. As the New York Magazine reported, a similar investigation by the Brooklyn District Attorney into the sting at Acorn's New York office reached the same finding, that the video was a heavily edited splice job and the responses taken wildly out of context. As Forbes reports, in 2013, O'Keefe was compelled by legal action to pay serious compensation to one of his smear victims, Juan Carlos Vera. The master of the cleverly edited, if highly deceptive video reel is now being required to pay the sum of $100,000 to Juan Carlos Vera. O'Keefe later got himself arrested for trying to wiretap Louisiana Democratic Senator Mary Landrieu's telephone. As the New Orleans Times-Picayune reports, O'Keefe received 3 years of probation, a fine of $1,500, and 100 hours of community service. Chaos for Glory, as a model of sleaze hunting and fabrication, had run to the ground for Breitbart's Golden Boy. The next scandal, unfolding in July 2010, targeted an African-American employee of the U.S. Department of Agriculture named Shirley Sherrod. In a blog post containing short excerpts of footage of Sherrod addressing the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Breitbart described the footage as proof that the NAACP awards racism. For in the footage, Sherrod describes how she racially discriminates against a white farmer. She describes how she is torn over how much she will choose to help him, and she admits that she doesn't do everything she can for him because he is white. Sherrod's racist tale is received by the NAACP audience with nodding, approval, and murmurs of recognition and agreement. Hardly the behavior of the group now holding itself up as the supreme judge of another group's racial tolerance. This was, Breitbart claimed, a perfect rationalization for why the Tea Party needs to exist. It proved, according to him, that while the Tea Party could be exonerated of racism, black civil rights organizations were the real racists, and the real victims, white people. When the full uncut video of over 43 minutes in length was released by the NAACP, which initially was snookered into going along with the denunciations of Sherrod, the truth became clear. Sherrod's comments pertained to employment that preceded her work for the Department of Agriculture, and she had raised it as part of a cautionary tale against the evils of racial separation. As the St. Louis Post-Dispatch reported, the comments were part of an NAACP speech about how she overcame her racial prejudice to help the farmer, not about prejudice that stopped her from helping him. Again and again, Breitbart has developed scoops or confected them based on outright inaccurate information. In 2014, it outed Obama's nominee for Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, as the same person who represented the Clintons during the Whitewater scandal. They were quickly told that they had got the wrong Loretta Lynch, but, as the Columbia Journalism Review points out, didn't take their original story down until after thousands of shares online. But they couldn't do this without connivance from mainstream outlets. They've been able to depend for publicity on mainstream news outlets such as Fox News, in the case of Acorn, or ABC News, in the case of their pursuit of a congressman's sexting scandal. Not long before his death in 2012, at the ripe old age of 43, Breitbart was videotaped descending on Occupy protesters, provocateur style, and screaming at them,
"Stop raping the people! You freaks! You filthy freaks! You filthy, 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 raping, murdering freaks!"
This hysterical reactionary sabotage offensive neatly epitomizes the major degenerate contribution that Breitbart has made to the political culture. And now it's working for the Trump campaign.